Slide, please. So I know all of you will be well versed about the growth of mobile telephony over the last decade, especially at the start of the noughties and through to 2010, and in this year as well. Most of our stats, again, we use free and openly available statistics. So at the time of doing the study, these were really up until 2008. But these are just some of the companies we spoke to and the 14 countries we looked at. Next slide, please. So if Mr. Chairman, please give me an indication of time when I'm running out. If you can let me know when I have, say, 3 minutes left, I'd appreciate it. We basically, looking at those 6 case study countries, we basically had, excellent, so I'm going to really speed up now. Looking at those 14 case study countries, we basically had 6 real areas of investigation. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to look at 2 areas really, and that's the development of development-focused applications, content, and services. What applications, content, and services that have a socioeconomic development angle are being used in those countries, and operators' attitudes towards working with UNICEF and other development organizations. Next slide, please. Looking at the 14 countries, we can conclude that there is really a lack or a dearth in the amount of development-focused apps, content, and services being used. It's unsurprising that the most popular services are really infotainment services. Those services that basically provide users with utility when it comes to sport or music were far more popular than any M4D services. And there are real questions and real concerns about how we can turn some of these very good M4D services into basically take them to scale, make them really widely used so they can have a major impact. And these 2 illustrations just basically give a breakdown of the services we found. Most of them were in health, and when you look at the pie chart on the right, you can see that most of them were in Uganda, which were followed by Bangladesh. And Uganda has a real nucleus of M4D practitioners, some real champions of M4D, and that seems to be a very important factor in whether a country has M4D services and initiatives running. Next slide, please. Looking at the operators, despite the lack of M4D services, we note that there is a clear willingness of operators to look at M4D services, to look at what M4D services can be produced. And these 2 quotes from 2 operator representatives really sum that up. However, both quotes indicate, in my opinion, that these services have to be created as commercial services for these operators to really be interested in doing that. How can they create services that, like M-Pesa, become widely used, become universal, that become ubiquitous, and create profit, revenue and profit for those operators? Next slide, please. Attitudes to working with UNICEF and development players were also very positive. These operators were very willing to do that. One of the reasons, some of the reasons why I'll explain. Next slide, please. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. One of the major reasons was the trust and reliability and fairness that UNICEF is known for, and other development players are known for. And these operators really felt that that brand association would be profitable, would be good for them, would have a real impact on their ability to deliver services. It's interesting to note that that was really felt by those operators in Iraq, where there is distrust at the moment. There is obviously some tension between people in Iraq, and that remains, and operators note that there is a feeling of distrust, and anything that conveys trust to users is very beneficial. Next slide, please. I may have moved a bit too fast myself. This slide basically highlights one of the major conclusions that we drew from the study, and that is, until this point, many of the M4D services, apps, content, and services are really developed using corporate social responsibility, and this is something that's corporate social responsibility arms of operators, and this is something that's really increased over the last 20 years. Many of these have existed for a long time. Orange, for example, has existed for 20 years or so. But we've concluded that it really is, while beneficial in piloting M4D, for example, we believe that development players really need to move away from this corporate social responsibility arm. These business units within operators don't have much budget. They can't really take things to scale, which is what we really need to do with some of these excellent M4D services. So we've just suggested that this may not be the best way for players like UNICEF and other development players to work. Next slide, please. Indeed, many of you will know that the GSMA has a development fund which has 3 core units which look at connectivity, energy and M services like the ones that we're going to be discussing at this conference over the next few days. They also have 6 key program areas and they're outlined there. But our interactions with GSMA indicate that despite them having a development fund, which would lead many of us in many development theorists and many of us working in ICT4D to think, wow, fantastic, we can go to these guys for funding for our own 4D initiatives. It's very much a business as usual approach. It's how can they create benefits for mobile users, but really do that so it also creates benefits for operators. And this really helped us draw key conclusions. Essentially for those development players that want to take M4D to scale, so that want to provide apps, content and services on a wide enough scale for it to have a major transformative development impact, we really will need to have a business as usual approach. We really will need to engage with operators on their terms and understand that they're going to wish to make revenue and profit at the same time as create the developmental impact and benefits that we want to see. Next slide, please. What does this mean? And some of you will want some time to review this schematic, but I'll quickly run through it. Basically, the left-hand side shows where we are now. And if you look at the 2 green oblongs on the left-hand side, the bottom one shows the kind of M4D we're creating now using corporate social responsibility. It's low yield and low scale. It also presents very little risk to operators. But as you can appreciate, it provides very limited benefit for those of us who want to see some real transformation in the lives of those who are currently excluded from receiving the benefits of development. And our feeling is that we can move both of those oblongs to the right-hand side, to the future, by leveraging the benefits that development players like UNICEF and other global players and other large NGOs can bring to the table. Essentially, that's helping to evaluate, helping to look at M4D and understand the challenges and the obstacles to creating M4D that can go to scale, and removing some of that risk that operators really, some operators are unprepared to take when it comes to creating M4D content, apps and services. And we're suggesting that basically major players can also help aggregate demand. UNICEF, for example, uses a number of SMSs, and if you take time to look at the case studies, has used SMS and other apps, open source apps, to create a huge amount of benefit in some of its programming already. And our suggestion is that a number of development